The captain didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I'm not flying with her," he said, flat and final, as if he were stating the weather. The cockpit fell silent. Not the calm silence of preparation, but the kind that presses against the ears. The low electrical hum, the faint click of cooling metal. Outside the windshield, the morning sun slid across the tarmac at Westchester County Airport, glinting off polished aluminum and black glass. A line of black SUVs idled below, engines purring, chauffeurs checking watches. Time was moving. The aircraft was not. Captain Robert Hale stood just inside the cockpit doorway, one hand braced against the frame. 61 years old, broad shoulders still holding their shape under a navy blazer, hair gone mostly grey, cut close, military neat. His jaw was set the way it had been set for decades, through storms, emergencies, funerals, and promotions. He had spent his life being listened to, being obeyed. In the right seat sat the woman he was refusing to fly with. She didn't look up at him at first. Her hands rested lightly on the tablet in her lap, screen dimmed, checklist paused. She was calm in a way that made people uneasy. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Dark skin, hair pulled back tight, no loose strands, no softness. Her uniform was immaculate, pressed sharp enough to cut. The name stitched above her pocket read, Evelyn Carter. The flight attendant hovered behind Hale, half hidden in the galley, pretending to straighten a coffee cup that had already been straightened 3 times. Her eyes flicked between the 2 pilots, then toward the door, then back again. She swallowed. "Captain," she said quietly, trying to smooth the air. "The passengers are ready to board." Hale didn't turn. "They can wait." Evelyn finally lifted her gaze. Her eyes met his. No challenge, no apology. Just steady attention, like a doctor studying a chart. "We're cleared for departure," she said. Her voice was even, low, controlled. "Weather window closes in under 40 minutes. If we miss it, we're delayed." Hale let out a breath through his nose, sharp, dismissive. "I'm aware of the weather." Then he stepped fully into the cockpit, blocking the aisle, filling the space with his presence. He looked down at her, not as a colleague, not as an equal, but as an obstacle. "This is a high net worth charter, private flight, board members, legal counsel. I asked for a senior first officer. I did not ask for a social experiment." The words landed heavy. The flight attendant flinched. Evelyn did not. "I'm fully qualified," she said. "My hours are logged. My type rating is current. Dispatch approved the crew." "Dispatch doesn't sit in this seat," Hale shot back. "I do." He tapped the left captain's chair with his knuckles. The sound echoed, hollow and sharp. In his mind, the picture was already forming. Headlines, lawyers, a mistake at altitude, a delay in reaction. The wrong voice in his headset when something went sideways. He had buried too many friends to gamble. He told himself this wasn't personal, that it was about safety, about standards, about protecting the people in the back who trusted him with their lives. But another voice whispered underneath it all, quieter, meaner, a voice he never acknowledged, only obeyed. "This isn't how it's supposed to look." Evelyn shifted slightly in her seat, not backing away, not adjusting, just adjusting, like a chess piece that didn't yet need to move. "If you have concerns," she said, "we can address them through operations, but refusing the flight puts us in breach of contract." Hale laughed once, short and humorless. "Contract," he said. "That's rich." He reached for the cockpit phone, fingers stiff, movements practiced. As he dialed, his reflection stared back at him from the dark glass of the instrument panel. A man who had earned everything. A man who had clawed his way up when flying meant hands on controls and sweat on your back, not software and optics. He had watched the industry change. He had survived it. He would not be told now, at this stage, that his instincts were obsolete. "Operations," he said into the handset. "This is Hale. We have a problem." Evelyn watched him as he spoke. Not the way a subordinate watches a superior, but the way someone watches a storm forming. She noted the tightness in his jaw, the way his knuckles whitened around the phone, the way his foot tapped once, twice, against the floor. Behind the cockpit door, the cabin was filling. Leather seats, low conversation, the rustle of coats being shrugged off. Somewhere, a man laughed too loudly. Someone else checked their phone. A donor from Connecticut, a retired judge, a corporate attorney with silver hair and a quiet voice. People who expected things to run smoothly. People who were used to being protected from tension. Hale lowered his voice as he spoke, but his anger bled through anyway. "I'm not taking off with this crew. I don't care what her file says. Find me a replacement, now." A pause. A muffled response from the other end. Hale's jaw tightened further, then ground the aircraft. Evelyn inhaled slowly. Not in fear, in calculation. This was no longer about a flight. It hadn't been for several minutes. She glanced at the clock on the panel. The seconds ticked by, indifferent. Outside, one of the SUV doors opened. A man stepped out, straightened his jacket, looked up at the plane. He checked his watch. Hale slammed the phone back into its cradle. "They're escalating," he said. "Fine. Let them." He turned to Evelyn, eyes cold. "You're done here. Gather your things." The flight attendant's breath caught audibly now. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't reach for her bag. She simply sat there, hands still, posture composed, eyes steady on the man trying to erase her. "Captain," she said, quietly enough that only he could hear. "You're making a decision you can't take back." Hale leaned closer, invading her space, his shadow falling across her uniform. "I've made harder ones before breakfast." For a moment, something flickered behind Evelyn's eyes. Not anger, not fear. Recognition. As if she had seen this exact moment coming long before today. As if this confrontation were not a surprise, but a checkpoint. She stood then, smoothly, deliberately, not rushed, not defiant, just controlled motion. The seat creaked softly as it slid back. Hale straightened, triumphant already, mistaking her movement for surrender. Instead, she reached into the inner pocket of her blazer and felt the edge of cold metal beneath her fingers. She didn't pull it out. Not yet. Outside, footsteps echoed on the stairs. Voices drew closer. The passengers were boarding. The door to the cockpit remained open. And every second that passed pulled the plane, the people, and the truth closer to a collision none of them could see yet. The first passenger stepped onto the aircraft just as the tension in the cockpit reached a breaking point. Leather shoes on metal stairs. A pause. Then the low murmur of a man who expected everything to work without friction. "Good morning," he said to the flight attendant, voice confident, practiced. He was followed by two others. Quiet wealth, controlled posture. People who had spent decades being ushered smoothly through doors that never slammed. Captain Hale turned toward the cabin instantly, professionalism snapping back into place like a mask pulled tight. His shoulders squared, his tone softened. "Welcome aboard," he said, already rewriting the moment in his head. This would be handled. It always was. Behind him, Evelyn Carter stood still. She watched the transformation with clinical precision, the way his jaw loosened, the way his voice dropped half an octave into something reassuring. She had seen this before, not in cockpits, but in boardrooms, courtrooms, city offices. Men who believed authority was something they owned rather than something they borrowed. The flight attendant caught Evelyn's eye as she passed, a silent plea. Please don't make this worse. Please don't make this loud. Evelyn gave her the smallest nod. Not compliance, not fear, just acknowledgement. Hale turned back toward her once the passengers had moved deeper into the cabin. His voice dropped again, sharp and controlled. You don't belong on this flight. The words were precise, chosen, not shouted, delivered the way a verdict is delivered when the judge is already certain. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. This aircraft is cleared, she said. The crew is legal. The flight plan is approved. Hale exhaled, slow and deliberate. I've flown into mountain weather older than you, he said. I've buried friends who trusted the wrong person at altitude. I will not put my name on a flight where I don't trust the person next to me. Trust. The word hung there, heavy, ambiguous, loaded. Evelyn felt it then. The pivot point. This wasn't about race alone, or gender, or age. Those were the surface fractures. Underneath was something older. Fear of erosion. Fear of replacement. Fear that the rules had changed while he wasn't looking, and no one had asked his permission. She stepped closer, closing the space between them just enough that he could hear her without raising his voice. Then be honest, she said. Say you don't want to fly with me because I don't fit the picture you trust. Hale's eyes hardened. Don't put words in my mouth. I don't need to, she replied. You already did. A voice called from the cabin. Captain? It was the retired judge. Calm, curious, not alarmed yet. Everything all right up there? Hale turned instantly. Minor delay, sir, he said. We'll have you airborne shortly. The judge nodded. He trusted systems. He trusted uniforms. He trusted that problems stayed invisible when they were handled by the right people. Evelyn watched him disappear back into his seat. She took a breath. Deep, measured. The kind of breath you take before you step into a room where your name means something different than your face suggests. Captain Hale, she said, louder now. Not confrontational, audible. I'm asking you to reconsider. He stared at her. On what grounds? She reached into her blazer again. The motion was slow, intentional, not dramatic, not defensive. Hale's eyes flicked to her hand, his posture stiffening just enough to betray unease. The flight attendant froze mid-step. Evelyn withdrew a folded document, thick paper, embossed seal. She unfolded it once, then again, and held it out between them. This aircraft, she said, is registered under Carter Aviation Holdings. Hale didn't take the paper. He glanced at it dismissively. That's not relevant. It is, she said, because I own Carter Aviation Holdings. The cockpit seemed to inhale. The words didn't explode. They didn't echo. They sank, heavy, immediate, final. Hale laughed. Not loudly, reflexively. The kind of laugh that comes when the brain rejects information before it has time to process it. That's not funny, he said. Evelyn didn't smile. I'm not joking. He reached for the paper now, snatched it from her hand, scanned the text. Registration number, tail identification, legal name, signature. His breath shortened as he read, his eyes moving faster, then slower, then back again. No, he said quietly. This plane belongs to the trust. It did, she said, until last week. The hum of the avionics seemed louder now. The air felt thinner. Hale looked up at her, really looked at her for the first time, not as a role, not as a problem, as a variable he had never considered. You should have said something, he snapped, grasping for ground. I did, she replied. In the briefing, in the file, in the ownership transfer notice sent to every captain on the roster. His jaw worked. I don't read administrative noise before flights. "That's clear," she said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, a baggage cart rolled past. Inside, a man who had never felt small felt the floor tilt beneath him. "You set me up," Hale said finally. Evelyn shook her head. "I showed up." The judge's voice drifted forward again. "Captain, are we delayed?" Hale swallowed. His throat felt dry. His pulse was loud in his ears. He had spent his life believing control lived in the left seat, in the title, in the history, and now it was slipping through his fingers, not because someone took it, but because it had never been where he thought it was. Evelyn met his gaze. "This doesn't have to end badly," she said, "but it will end truthfully." Hale stared at the captain's chair, at the controls, at the space where he had always believed he belonged. Outside the cockpit, the passengers waited. Inside, a man stood at the edge of a reckoning he could no longer outrun. Captain Hale felt it in his chest before he admitted it to his mind. The shift. The moment when gravity changed direction, and everything he thought was solid began to slide. He folded the document once, twice, too carefully, as if precision might restore control. He handed it back to Evelyn without meeting her eyes. "Ownership doesn't put you in my cockpit," he said. But the words lacked weight now. They sounded rehearsed, defensive, old. Evelyn took the paper and returned it to her blazer. "You're right," she said. "Ownership doesn't." She paused, just long enough for the silence to sting. "Certification does." She reached down, tapped the tablet still resting on the seat. With a few controlled movements, she brought up a file and turned the screen toward him. Hale didn't want to look. He did anyway. Typewriting, recurrent training, check ride sign-offs, dates, signatures. Everything clean, everything current. Too current. "This flight was assigned to me as pilot in command," Evelyn said. "You were notified." "I was not," Hale snapped. "You were," she replied. "You chose not to read it." That landed harder than any insult. Hale felt heat crawl up his neck. Around them, the cockpit seemed smaller now, closer. He could hear the passengers shifting in their seats, belts clicking, conversations trailing off as minutes stretched too long. Delay always drew attention. Attention invited questions. Questions invited scrutiny. The flight attendant appeared again at the cockpit door, eyes wide, voice low. "Captain, the passengers are asking for an update." Hale opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded once. "Tell them we're finalizing crew coordination." Crew coordination. The phrase tasted bitter. It was the kind of language he had once taught younger pilots. Neutral, safe, empty. When she left, Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This is the last point where this stays professional," she said. "After this, it becomes documented." Hale turned sharply. "You think you can walk in here, hide who you are, and then threaten my career?" "I didn't hide," she said. "I arrived exactly as assigned." He laughed again, but there was no humor left in it. "You wanted this," he said. "You wanted to see how far you could push." Evelyn's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with something heavier. Disappointment. "I wanted to see who you were when you thought no one important was watching." That cut deeper than he expected. For a flash, Hale saw himself as she must see him now. A man clinging to authority like a life raft. A man confusing experience with entitlement. He pushed the image away. "You're grounding my flight," he said. "You know that, right?" "No," she replied. "You are." The words hung there, undeniable. From the cabin, a voice rose. Calm, educated, unmistakably used to being heard. Captain Hale. It was the attorney. Late 60s, measured tone. No panic yet, just irritation edged with concern. "We've been sitting for a while." Hale turned toward the door, his pulse hammered. This was the point where things spilled into public view, where reputations began to bleed. He forced a smile into his voice. "We appreciate your patience. We'll have clarity shortly." Clarity. Another safe word. Evelyn watched him lie without flinching. She wondered, briefly, how many times he had done this before. How many moments had been smoothed over by confidence and volume and history. "Here's what's going to happen," she said quietly. "We're either going to fly this aircraft together under standard CRM, or you're going to step off and file a refusal." Hale stiffened. "And if I refuse?" "Then operations records it, legal reviews it, insurance flags it." She met his eyes. "And I learn exactly what kind of company I just bought."
The phrase settled in the cockpit like a verdict.
"You're forcing me," Hale said. "I'm giving you a choice," she answered. "Forcing would look very different." He looked at the left seat. The familiar angles, the worn leather, the place where he had spent thousands of hours believing he was indispensable. He thought of the logbooks, the retirement he had planned, the quiet respect he expected to carry him out of this career on his own terms. He also thought of the alternative, of standing in front of these passengers and explaining why the flight wasn't leaving, of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person and watching 40 years collapse into a headline. "You think you've already won," he said. Evelyn shook her head. "This isn't about winning." "Then what is it about?" he demanded. She held his gaze, unwavering. "Whether you're still safe to fly with when you don't feel powerful." The words hit him like sudden turbulence. Unpredictable, violent, exposing. For a long moment, neither spoke. The aircraft waited. The sky waited. Outside, clouds crept closer to the mountains, indifferent to pride or fear. Finally, Hale exhaled. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't acceptance. It was something older. Fatigue. "If we do this," he said slowly, "you don't undermine me in front of the passengers." "I won't," Evelyn replied, "unless you force me to. And you follow protocol." "I wrote part of it," she said. That almost earned a smile from him. Almost. He nodded once. Sharp, decisive, the way he always did when committing to a course of action. "Fine," he said. "We fly." Evelyn didn't move to the captain's chair yet. She waited, watching him process what he had just agreed to. Watching the man who had refused to fly with her moments ago now accept her authority without applause, without witnesses. "Captain," she said, using the title deliberately. "Call the cabin. Let them know we're preparing for departure." Hale reached for the intercom. His hand trembled, just slightly. "This is your captain speaking," he said into the mic, voice steady by habit alone. "Thank you for your patience. We'll be pushing back shortly." As he released the button, he realized something that unsettled him more than any argument. The flight was no longer his to control. And somewhere deep beneath the layers of training and ego and fear, he understood that this was only the beginning. The doors closed with a dull, final thud. Not loud, not dramatic, just definitive. The sound echoed through the cabin and into the cockpit, sealing everyone inside with the decision that had just been made. The aircraft was no longer a debate. It was a commitment. Captain Hale slid into the left seat out of muscle memory, then stopped. Just for a fraction of a second, long enough to feel it. The hesitation. The awareness that the space did not belong to him in the same way anymore. He adjusted anyway, hands moving automatically, fingers brushing switches he had touched 1,000 times before. The ritual steadied him, or tried to. Evelyn remained standing for a moment longer, watching him from behind. She noted the way his shoulders were tight, lifted too high, the way his breathing was controlled but shallow. Stress management mattered more than stick and rudder right now. She knew that. He did not. She stepped into the right seat, deliberate, unhurried, and sat. The chair sighed softly under her weight. She strapped in, checked her harness, then placed both hands flat on her thighs. She didn't rush the checklist. She didn't rush him. "Before start checklist," Hale said. The words came out clean, professional, as if the last half hour had not happened, as if authority could be restored through procedure alone. Evelyn picked up the laminated card. Her voice was steady, neutral. "Before start checklist," she echoed. "Battery switch." "On," Hale replied, flipping it. The avionics came alive, screens blooming with color. Synthetic horizons, engine indications, the familiar digital heartbeat of a modern aircraft. Hale focused on the displays, grateful for something that obeyed without judgment. As they moved through the flow, the cabin crew finished securing the galley. A cart locked into place with a sharp click. Seatbelts chimed. A child's voice whispered a question that went unanswered. The attorney cleared his throat somewhere behind the cockpit door. Evelyn watched Hale's hands. They were precise, efficient. Years of discipline lived there. But she also saw the micro-delays, the fraction of a second too long before each response, the way he checked the same indicator twice. He was thinking about more than the checklist. That was dangerous. "Fuel pumps," she said. "All on. Hydronics. Normal." She nodded, eyes scanning, confirming independently. This was not a test. This was trust. Rebuilt one verified item at a time. "Captain," she said, keeping her tone calm. "After start, I'll take radios." Hale stiffened. "I've always, I know," she said, cutting in gently but firmly. "This sector is congested. I want you focused on aircraft handling." There it was, the first real transfer of control. Not announced, not ceremonial, just executed. Hale hesitated, then nodded. "Fine." Outside, the tug latched onto the nose gear. A ground crewman raised his hand, waiting for the signal. The engines sat quiet, heavy with potential. "Cabin secure," the flight attendant called through the interphone. Hale pressed the button. "Copy." Evelyn met his gaze briefly. "Ready when you are." He swallowed, then raised his hand and gave the pushback signal. The aircraft began to move, slow and smooth, rolling backward into open space. There was no going back now, no pause, no exit. As the engines spooled to life, a low rumble building into a controlled roar, Hale felt something unexpected. Not fear, not anger. A strange clarity. The kind that comes when pride is no longer useful and only competence matters. "Engine 1 stable," he said. "Engine 2 stable," Evelyn replied. They taxied out under a sky that was already changing, high clouds creeping in from the west. The mountains waited, indifferent. At the hold short line, Hale set the brakes. He ran the before takeoff flow, voice steady again, confidence reasserting itself through habit. This, at least, was familiar ground. Evelyn finished her checks and looked at him. "Takeoff briefing," she said. Hale began automatically, then stopped. His mouth closed. He exhaled through his nose. "You do it," he said. The words surprised them both. Evelyn studied him for a beat, gauging whether this was strategy or surrender. Then she nodded. "All right." She delivered the briefing cleanly, speeds spoken clearly. Abort points defined, Failure scenarios addressed without drama. Her voice did not rise or fall. It didn't need to. Every word landed with quiet authority. Hale listened. Really listened. He found no gaps, no bravado, no shortcuts. Just preparation. When she finished, there was a pause. "Any questions?" she asked. He shook his head. "No." She looked forward, hands resting lightly on the controls. "Tower," she said into the radio. "This is Carter 641, ready for departure." Clearance came back almost immediately. The runway stretched ahead of them, long and unforgiving. Hale wrapped his hands around the yoke, feeling the vibration of the engines through the frame. This was still his element, still his responsibility. As the aircraft lined up, the tension in his chest tightened once more. He glanced sideways at Evelyn. She was calm, focused, present. The throttles advanced. The engines responded. Acceleration pressed them back into their seats. 80 knots, Evelyn called. Checked. The speed built fast, faster than his thoughts. V1, a point of no return. Rotate. Hale pulled back. The nose lifted. The ground fell away. For a brief moment, suspended between earth and sky, Hale felt it clearly. The truth he had been resisting all morning. This flight was no longer about who deserved the seat. It was about who could keep them alive when the margin disappeared. And he was no longer sure which of them that was. The climb was smooth at first. Too smooth. The kind that lulls pilots into believing the hardest part is already behind them. The city fell away beneath the wings, grey giving way to green, then to the dull blue haze of distance. Hale adjusted the trim, eyes flicking between airspeed, vertical rate, engine instruments. Everything sat where it should. Numbers behaved. Systems complied. The airplane felt solid, predictable. That should have reassured him. It didn't. Evelyn's voice cut clean through the cockpit. "Passing 10,000. Hale reached for the landing lights. Lights off. She watched his hand linger half a second longer than necessary on the switch. A tiny pause. Almost nothing. Almost everything. "Climb power set," he said. "Confirmed." They flew in silence for a stretch, broken only by radio calls and the faint whine of air rushing past the fuselage. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but crowded. Thoughts pressing in, assumptions unraveling. Hale had expected resistance from her, a comment, a correction, some subtle assertion of dominance now that the plane was airborne and the reveal had landed. Instead, she flew like he wasn't there at all. No theatrics, no quiet vengeance, just discipline. That unsettled him more than open confrontation. "You always fly this quiet?" he asked finally, unable to stop himself. Evelyn didn't look at him. When the cockpit is loud, it's usually because something's wrong. He almost smiled at that. Almost. They leveled off briefly, then continued climbing. The mountains loomed ahead now, their outlines sharper, darker, indifferent to schedules or egos. Clouds stacked higher than forecast. Thick. Heavy. The weather window was narrowing faster than expected. "Center just updated turbulence reports," Evelyn said. "Moderate chop reported above flight level 260. Hale frowned. Forecast said light. "It changed," she replied. "It does that." There it was again, that subtle reminder. The world doesn't owe you consistency. He nodded. "Let's keep it below for now." Agreed. She adjusted the climb profile without comment, fingers moving with practiced ease. Hale noticed she flew the airplane more than he did. Small inputs, constant corrections. She wasn't letting the automation do all the thinking. That bothered him, and impressed him. The cabin call light chimed. Hale reached for the interphone, then stopped himself. You want it? Evelyn glanced at him. No, you take it. He pressed the button. Go ahead.
The flight attendant's voice came through, controlled but edged. Captain, one of the passengers is feeling the climb, asking how long until we smooth out. Hale looked instinctively toward Evelyn. She met his eyes and gave a slight nod. Permission, not command. We're adjusting altitude for comfort, Hale said into the mic. Should smooth out shortly. Thank you, Captain. The word landed differently this time. When he released the button, he exhaled slowly. They trust the voice, he said, even when they don't know what's happening. They trust confidence, Evelyn replied. They trust calm, not volume. He didn't answer. He couldn't argue with it. The turbulence hit sooner than expected. Not violent, not yet. Just enough to rattle the cockpit, a subtle vibration that crept into the seat and the spine. Hale tightened his grip without realizing it. Evelyn noticed. Relax your shoulders, she said, not looking at him. You're fighting the airplane. I'm fine, he snapped.
The next bump hit harder. She turned then, eyes sharp. Robert, she said, using his first name for the first time. You don't need to prove anything to me up here. I need you clear. That stopped him. He forced his hands to loosen, rolled his neck once, let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. The plane responded instantly, smoothing slightly as he stopped overcorrecting. Better, she said. He nodded, jaw tight. Understood. They climbed another 1,000 feet. The air grew thinner. The light outside sharpened, harsh and bright, reflecting off cloud tops like broken glass. For a moment, the world looked unreal, suspended. Then a chime. Different this time, a soft, insistent tone. Hale's eyes snapped to the panel. His pulse spiked. You seeing that? Evelyn was already scanning. I see it. The caution light glowed amber, not red, not yet. Engine parameters flickered, then stabilized, then flickered again. Hale felt a cold awareness spread through his chest. This wasn't dramatic. This wasn't obvious. This was the kind of problem that hid until it didn't. Oil pressure fluctuation, he said. Confirmed, Evelyn replied. Her voice hadn't changed, not even slightly. He watched her hands. They didn't rush. They didn't freeze. They moved with purpose, adjusting power, monitoring response. The turbulence returned, sharper now, rattling the cockpit windows. The aircraft shuddered. Let's hold here, she said. No more climb. Agreed. The caution light stayed on. Not escalating, not clearing. Just there. Hale felt sweat form at his temples. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, hoping she didn't notice. She did. This is where people make mistakes, she said quietly. When nothing is screaming yet. He swallowed. I've seen worse. I know, she replied. That's why I need you with me. With me, not under me, not against me. The words settled between them, heavier than any warning light. Outside, the clouds thickened, swallowing the horizon. The smooth, confident climb of minutes ago felt distant now, replaced by a narrowing tunnel of attention. Instruments, sound, feel. Hale stared at the engine readouts, searching for patterns, for certainty. He realized something then that unsettled him more than the caution light. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he was the calmest person in the cockpit. And the aircraft knew it. The amber light pulsed again, steady, patient, waiting. Whatever was coming next would not care who owned the plane. It would only care who could think clearly when the margin finally disappeared. The caution light didn't blink anymore. It stayed on, steady, unwavering, like a held breath that refused to release. Hale leaned closer to the panel, as if proximity could give him answers the numbers weren't offering. Oil pressure sat just below nominal. Temperature edged upward, not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to whisper danger.
The kind of whisper pilots learned to respect early or regret later.
"Let's run the abnormal checklist," he said. Evelyn nodded once. Already there. She pulled the checklist up, eyes moving fast, absorbing, filtering. Not rushing. Hale noticed how little she spoke now. No commentary, no narration. Just decisions expressed through action. It reminded him of combat footage he'd once seen. Pilots working through smoke and noise with the same controlled economy of motion. "Turbulence increasing," Hale said. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time. A lateral kick, then a brief drop that tugged at his stomach. Somewhere behind them, a glass clinked, a sharp intake of breath. The cabin went quiet in that way people do when they sense something is wrong, but don't yet know how wrong. "Seatbelt sign stays on," Evelyn said. "Advise cabin." Hale keyed the mic. "Cabin, remain seated. Expect a few bumps." His voice held. Years of practice carried it through, even as his heart rate climbed.
When he released the button, Evelyn spoke without looking at him.
"If this trends the wrong way, we divert. Closest suitable is south. Flat terrain, long runway." He bristled instinctively. "We're not there yet." "I know," she said. "I'm not asking. I'm preparing." That difference mattered. Preparation versus panic. He felt the edge of his irritation dull, replaced by something else. Respect, maybe. Or relief. Another jolt hit, stronger. The yoke vibrated under his hands. Hale adjusted, correcting smoothly, muscle memory kicking in. The airplane responded, but sluggishly now, like it was moving through thick air. Then a new sound crept into the cockpit. Subtle, a low, uneven vibration that didn't belong. Hale froze for half a second too long. "You feel that?" he asked. "Yes," Evelyn said instantly. "I've got it." She reached up, adjusted power with surgical precision. The vibration lessened, then returned, irregular. Hale's mouth went dry. "This isn't turbulence," he said. "No," she replied. "It's internal." The word hung heavy. Internal meant mechanical. Mechanical meant consequences. Hale's mind raced through possibilities. Bearing, seal, pump. All manageable, all survivable, if handled early, if handled right. Another shudder rippled through the airframe. This one was unmistakable. The aircraft yawed slightly before the dampers caught it. Hale felt a flash of anger at himself, at the mourning, at the wasted energy, at the stupid, unnecessary fight that had put him in this headspace instead of where he needed to be. "Okay," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Let's slow it down." Evelyn turned her head and looked at him fully now. Her expression wasn't judgmental. It wasn't triumphant. It was focused, intense, present. "Robert," she said, "I need you with me, not ahead of me, not behind me. Right here." He nodded, once, sharp, the way he used to nod when he committed to a hard call. "I'm here," he said. The next vibration hit harder than the rest. The panel rattled. The warning tone chimed again, louder this time, joined by a second alert. Amber, then red. Hale's breath caught. "We've got a secondary warning." "I see it," Evelyn said. "I have control." The words were calm, absolute. Hale didn't argue. He didn't hesitate. He released pressure on the yoke, hands hovering, ready, but no longer leading. Evelyn flew the aeroplane. Not aggressively, not heroically. She flew it the way you hold something fragile and heavy at the same time. Firm enough to command it, gentle enough not to break it. "Robert," she said, eyes never leaving the instruments, "I want you on systems. Call out anything that trends worse. No assumptions." "Yes," he replied, and meant it. The cabin call light flashed again, urgent now. "Leave it," Evelyn said. "I'll address them in a moment." Another jolt. Stronger. The vibration deepened, uneven, almost growling now. Hale felt sweat trickle down his back.
"This is no longer a maybe," he said quietly.
"No," she agreed. "It's a now."
She keyed the radio, voice steady as stone.
"Center, Carter 641 declaring an emergency. Request immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport." The response came back fast, professional, serious. As Evelyn read it back, Hale watched her hand.
It settled into something deeper, slower, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Hale read the instruments out loud now, his voice steadier than he felt. Oil pressure trending down, temperature holding, vibration increasing.
"Copy," Evelyn said. "We're committed." The word landed with weight. Committed meant no more options, only execution. The sky darkened as they slipped beneath the cloud layer. Gray swallowed blue. The light flattened, cinematic and unforgiving. Raindrops streaked across the windshield, thin at first, then thicker, distorting the world ahead. "Runway is 12,000 feet, Hale said, eyes scanning the moving map. "Flat, no terrain." "Good," Evelyn replied. "We'll need every foot." Another violent shudder ripped through the airframe. This one wasn't subtle. The panel buzzed. A warning tone screamed sharp and immediate. "Red." Hale's stomach dropped. Engine parameters spiking. "I know," Evelyn said, voice unchanged. "Stay with me." The aircraft yawed hard to the left, sudden and aggressive. Hale instinctively reached for the yoke, then stopped himself mid-motion. His hands froze in the air, fingers curled, muscles screaming to take over. "Don't," Evelyn said, not loud, but absolute. He pulled his hands back, clenched them into fists against his thighs, his jaw locked. This was the hardest thing he had done in years. Harder than any approach in weather, harder than any check ride. Letting go. "Fire risk?" he asked. "Possible," she said. "Not confirmed." The vibration worsened, a tearing sensation now, not audible so much as felt, traveling through the frame, into the bones. Hale tasted metal at the back of his throat. "This is bad," he said, not panicked, just honest. "Yes," Evelyn replied. "It is." She reached up, deliberate, and reduced power further. The aircraft protested, sinking faster. The vertical speed indicator crept downward. "We're heavy," Hale said. "I know." Silence filled the cockpit, except for alarms and the roar of stressed machinery. The kind of silence where thoughts get loud. Hale thought of the morning, the words he'd chosen, the confidence he'd mistaken for certainty, the moment he'd believed refusing her was the right call. He wondered how close he'd come to making this worse, how close he'd come to not being here at all. "Cabin needs briefing," he said. Evelyn nodded. "You do it." He hesitated. "What should I tell them?" "The truth," she said. Short, calm. He keyed the interphone, voice steady by sheer force of will. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We're experiencing a mechanical issue and will be landing shortly at an alternate airport. Please remain seated with your belts fastened. The crew is fully in control." He released the button, exhaled hard. His hands were shaking now. He didn't hide it. "Thank you," Evelyn said. Another shudder hit, harder than before. The aircraft rolled slightly, then corrected.
Hale felt his heart slam against his ribs.
"This is degrading fast," he said. "I know," she repeated. "We're ahead of it." He believed her. That realization startled him more than the alarms. The runway appeared through the rain, long and grey, stretching out like a promise and a threat at the same time. Wind buffeted them from the side, gusting unpredictable, pushing against the wounded aircraft. "Crosswind," Hale said. "I see it." She adjusted, compensating smoothly, hands moving in concert, not fighting the wind, but shaping around it. Hale watched, transfixed. This was flying stripped down to its core. No ego, no narrative, just physics and judgment. Another alarm blared. The vibration peaked, then suddenly shifted, uneven and violent. "We're losing it," Hale said, voice tight. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked across the panel, then outside, then back again. Calculation. Decision. "Engine failure imminent," she said calmly. "We're landing now." She disconnected the automation. The change was immediate. The aircraft felt raw, alive, resistant. Hale felt the difference through the seat, through the yoke he was no longer touching. "I need call-outs," she said. "Airspeed only." "Yes," he replied. The approach was steep, faster than he liked, faster than he had ever briefed. But there was no room for finesse anymore, only survival. "Airspeed 190, Hale called. "Hi," Evelyn said, easing back, bleeding energy without losing control. 185. "Good." Rain hammered the windshield now, heavy sheets blurring the runway edges. The gusts shoved them sideways. Evelyn corrected instantly, continuously, never overcorrecting, never freezing. 178. The vibrations spiked again, then something changed. A sudden release, a drop in resistance. The left side of the aircraft lurched. "Engine's gone," Hale said. "I know," Evelyn said. "Stay with me." The runway rushed up. 172. "Gear down," she said.
Hale moved automatically, training overriding fear.
"Gear down. 3 green, 168. They were coming in hot. Too hot. Hale felt it in his gut. "Trust me," Evelyn said, as if reading his thoughts. He did. He had no choice. And maybe, finally, he understood that trust wasn't weakness. It was clarity. 165. The threshold filled the windshield. The ground surged toward them, fast and unforgiving. "Now," Evelyn said. She flared late, aggressive. Perfect. The wheels slammed into the runway with a bone-jarring impact. The aircraft bucked, protested, screamed. Evelyn forced the nose down, weight on wheels, brakes engaged hard. "Reverse!" Hale shouted. She pulled it, one engine screaming in defiance as the aircraft shuddered, decelerating violently. Hale watched the distance markers flash past, heart in his throat. The end of the runway rushed toward them. Then, slowly, impossibly, they slowed. 50 knots, 40, 30. The aircraft rolled, wounded but alive, and finally came to a stop, with hundreds of feet to spare. Silence crashed into the cockpit like a wave. Hale sucked in air, chest heaving, vision swimming. His hands trembled uncontrollably now. He didn't care. Evelyn sat back, just slightly, as if only now allowing the weight to land. Her hands rested on the controls, knuckles white, breath shallow. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Hale looked at her. Really looked. "You saved us," he said. The words cracked. They were raw, unfiltered. "All of us." Evelyn closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. The intensity was gone, replaced by exhaustion. "Humanity. We saved us," she said. Because you listened. Hale swallowed hard. Outside, emergency vehicles raced toward them, lights flashing through the rain. The world was rushing back in. But inside the cockpit, something else had shifted. Something quieter. Deeper. The man who had refused to fly with her that morning was gone.
What remained was someone stripped bare by truth, sitting in the wreckage of his certainty, finally understanding how close he had come to losing everything that mattered. The emergency vehicles reached them in a blur of red and white, lights slicing through the rain like sirens made of color. Hale watched them approach through the windshield, their reflections trembling across the wet glass, and felt the delayed shock finally punch through his chest. His breathing was shallow now, uneven, the kind that comes after danger has passed, and the body realizes how close it was to failing. Evelyn was already moving, not rushed, not dramatic. She ran the shutdown flow from memory, fingers steady despite the faint tremor in her hands. Fuel cutoff, electrical isolation. The aircraft exhaled around them, a deep mechanical sigh, as systems powered down one by one. Silence returned in layers. APU available, Hale said, forcing his voice to work. Good, she replied. Get air to the cabin. He nodded and did it. Muscle memory. Familiar ground again. The cockpit filled with a softer hum, less threatening, more human. Somewhere behind the cockpit door, someone started crying. Not loudly, the kind of quiet crying people do when they're trying not to be seen. Hale unstrapped slowly. His legs felt hollow when he stood, like they might fold if he moved too fast. He steadied himself with a hand on the seatback, then looked at Evelyn. Do you want me to brief them? He asked. She met his eyes. There was no calculation in her expression now, no authority being weighed, just assessment. Yes, she said. They know your voice. That stung. Not cruelly, truthfully. Hale opened the cockpit door. The cabin air was thick, heavy with fear and relief tangled together. Faces turned toward him instantly, pale, wide-eyed, searching. The retired judge clutched the armrest with both hands. The attorney's jaw was tight, lips pressed thin. A woman in the second row had her head bowed, hands folded as if in prayer. We're on the ground, Hale said. His voice carried farther than he expected. It always had. Emergency crews are here. You're safe. The word safe rippled through the cabin like a release valve. Shoulders sagged. Breath escaped. Someone whispered, thank you. Someone else laughed, sharp and brittle, then covered their mouth in embarrassment. Please remain seated until crews give us clearance, he continued. We'll get you off shortly. He stepped aside as firefighters boarded, boots heavy, movements precise. They scanned, checked, nodded. One of them looked into the cockpit, met Evelyn's eyes, and gave a short, respectful nod before moving on. Hale noticed. It stayed with him. When the cabin was under control, he returned to the cockpit. Evelyn was sitting again, shoulders slumped now that the adrenaline was draining. She looked smaller somehow. Human. The myth stripped away. You did well back there, she said quietly. He shook his head. You did. She didn't argue this time. Outside, rain continued to fall, softer now. The aircraft sat scarred but intact, streaked with water and foam, emergency lights still flashing around it like a perimeter. A machine that had been pushed to the edge and pulled back by judgment and restraint. Hale sat heavily in the jump seat. He stared at his hands. They were still shaking. I almost took the controls, he said, when it yawed. I almost did. Evelyn nodded. I saw. If I had. He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. But you didn't, she said. That matters. He swallowed. The weight of it pressed down on him now, heavier than fear had been in the air. The understanding that his instincts, once so reliable,
had almost betrayed him. That authority without clarity was dangerous. "I misjudged you," he said finally. The words felt inadequate, small. "Before we ever left the ground." "Yes," she replied, not angry, not triumphant, just honest. He looked up at her then. "Why didn't you stop it earlier, before it got this far?" Evelyn leaned back, eyes drifting to the darkened screens. "Because some lessons can't be explained," she said. "They have to be lived." He nodded slowly. He didn't like that answer, but he understood it. A voice crackled over the radio, breaking the moment. "Ground control, instructions, logistics beginning to reassert themselves. Paperwork, reports, the machinery of consequence grinding into motion." Hale knew what came next. Investigations, data downloads, interviews. He had been on the other side of that process before, as a witness, as a mentor, never as a variable. He looked at Evelyn. "What happens now?" She turned to him, eyes steady once more, but softer than before. "Now we tell the truth," she said, "and then we see what's left." Outside, the rain finally began to ease. Inside the cockpit, a man who had spent his life believing in control sat quietly, facing the aftermath of a moment that had stripped him down to his core. For the first time in decades, he wasn't thinking about his logbook. He was thinking about who he had almost been when it mattered most. The meeting room at the Regional Operations Center was too bright. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flat and unforgiving, washing the color out of everything they touched. Hale sat at the long table with his hands folded in front of him, jacket still damp at the cuffs. Across from him, a safety officer arranged documents into neat stacks. A recorder blinked red. Evelyn stood near the window, not sitting, not pacing, just present. The rain-streaked glass behind her reflected the runway in fragments, emergency vehicles still parked like silent witnesses. "Time of incident," the safety officer said, voice neutral, practiced. "Captain?" Hale cleared his throat. Approximately 10 minutes after initial climb. And at that time, who was pilot flying? Hale felt the weight of the question settle into his chest. This was it. The moment where narratives were shaped, where careers quietly lived or died. He thought of the passengers' faces, the vibration, the second where his hands had hovered over the controls, ready to make the wrong decision. He glanced at Evelyn. She wasn't watching him for reassurance. She wasn't watching him at all. She was looking out the window, arms crossed loosely, trusting him to answer without pressure. "I was pilot monitoring," Hale said. "Evelyn Carter was pilot flying." The safety officer nodded, jotting notes. "At any point did you assume control?" "No," Hale replied. His voice didn't waver. "I did not." A pause. The recorder hummed softly. "Did you consider it?" the officer asked. Hale didn't answer immediately. He could have deflected, could have softened the truth. Instead, he took a breath. "Yes," he said, for a moment. "And I was wrong to." The officer's pen stopped, just briefly. Evelyn turned from the window then. She met Hale's eyes. There was no surprise there, only something like respect. The safety officer looked between them. "Thank you," he said quietly. "That clarity matters." They moved through the rest methodically. Data points, decisions, timelines. No accusations, no raised voices. Just the slow, careful dissection of a moment that could have ended very differently. When it was over, the officer closed his folder. "There will be a formal review," he said. "That's standard. Both of you will be contacted." Hale nodded. He had expected this. He felt oddly calm. Outside the room, the corridor smelled of coffee and disinfectant. Voices echoed faintly. Life continuing. Evelyn stopped near the door. "I'll handle the company side," she said. "You'll hear from legal." He studied her face. There was no judgment there, no gloating, just resolve. "Are you firing me?" he asked.
She didn't answer right away.
"I'm not deciding anything today," she said. Today was about surviving. He absorbed that, then nodded. Fair. They walked together toward the exit, not side by side exactly, but no longer divided by hostility. Two professionals moving through the aftermath of something that had stripped pretense away. At the curb, a car waited. The driver stepped out, holding the door open for Evelyn. Before she got in, she turned back to Hale. "You told the truth," she said. "That matters more than you realize." He swallowed. It was the least I could do. "No," she replied. "It wasn't." She got into the car. The door closed softly. The vehicle pulled away, tires hissing on wet pavement. Hale stood there alone, hands in his pockets, watching the taillights disappear. For the first time that day, the sky was beginning to clear. He didn't know what the review would bring. He didn't know what would be taken from him, or what he might be allowed to keep, but he knew something else now. Something that had nothing to do with titles, or seats, or history. When it mattered most, he had chosen honesty over ego. And for a man who had built his life on control, that choice felt like the beginning of something he had never expected. An ending. Or maybe, quietly, a reckoning. The letter arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, slid halfway under Hale's apartment door like it didn't want to be seen. Cream paper, thick, heavy. The kind of envelope that never carries good news, only decisions already made. Hale stared at it for a long moment before bending down to pick it up, his knees stiff, his back reminding him that the sky was no longer something he belonged to. He didn't open it right away. He made coffee first. Black, no sugar. The way he had drunk it for decades before dawn briefings and late returns. The apartment was silent except for the slow drip of the machine and the distant sound of traffic climbing the highway. Life going on without him. Always had. Always would. He finally sat at the small kitchen table and broke the seal. The review board's language was precise, careful, almost gentle. Findings, conclusions, recommendations. His eyes moved slower with each line, not because the words were difficult, but because the meaning settled heavier than he expected. There would be no public sanction, no license revocation, no formal reprimand placed in a permanent record. The board acknowledged the mechanical failure, the crew coordination, the successful outcome. And then came the final paragraph. A recommendation, not a requirement. An invitation disguised as an exit. Early retirement, effective immediately. Medical and stress considerations. Full benefits preserved. Quiet. Hale folded the letter and set it down. His hands didn't shake this time. He had known this was coming. The truth always brings its own gravity. He had felt it the moment he spoke honestly in that bright, unforgiving room. This was simply the landing phase. Later that afternoon, he found himself driving without a destination, the city thinning out until concrete gave way to chain-link fences and wide-open space. The airport appeared almost by accident, runways stretching out like memories you don't ask for, but get anyway. He parked near the perimeter road and stepped out, the wind cutting through his jacket, carrying the familiar scent of fuel and rain-soaked asphalt. A jet rolled past in the distance, engines rising, then fading. Hale watched it climb, smooth and confident, and felt the ache settle deep in his chest. Not envy, not regret. Something quieter. Acceptance. He thought of Evelyn then, not as an owner, not as an authority, as a pilot, as the person who had stood steady when the world had narrowed to noise and vibration and choice. He understood now that the hardest part of that day hadn't been the emergency.
It had been the moment before it, when he had been asked to trust someone he didn't understand yet. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message. Simple, direct. It was from her. "Thank you for handling the review the way you did. The fleet is stronger for it. Take care of yourself." No signature. None needed. Hale typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Finally, he sent something short. Honest. Fly safe. He slipped the phone away and stood there a while longer, watching planes come and go, feeling the strange relief of not being responsible for any of them anymore. The sky had always demanded humility. He had learned that too late, but not too late to matter. Weeks passed. The routine shifted. Mornings without alarms, afternoons that stretched longer than they should. Hale filled the time slowly, volunteering at a flight museum, teaching young mechanics how to read wear patterns on old parts, telling stories he had never told before. Stories that didn't make him the hero, just a man who had been there. One evening, he received an envelope that felt different, smaller, lighter. Inside was a handwritten note on plain paper. "Robert, I'm putting together a mentorship program for senior pilots transitioning out of the cockpit. Experience matters, but only when it's paired with reflection. If you're interested, I'd value your perspective. Evelyn." Hale smiled despite himself. Not wide, just enough. He wrote back that night. Yes, he would help. He would speak honestly. He would teach what the manuals never covered. The moment when confidence becomes liability. The instant when listening saves lives. On the first day of the program, he stood in front of a small room of pilots half his age, some skeptical, some eager, some already afraid of becoming obsolete. He told them about weather patterns and decision trees, about trust and restraint. He told them about the day he almost got it wrong, and the woman who didn't. No names, no dramatics, just truth. When he finished, the room was quiet, not uncomfortable, focused. That night, Hale drove home under a sky streaked with fading light. A jet crossed overhead, contrails catching the last orange glow. He watched until it vanished. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. If this story stayed with you, like it did with him, tap like, subscribe to the channel, and comment, "Tell us more."